Welcome to the Burnout to Lit Up podcast. I'm your host, Erica Del Pozo, occupational therapist, Miami girl, and founder and CEO of Joy Energy Time, where it's our mission to build a better healthcare industry by ending healthcare provider burnout. In these episodes, we'll discuss topics like stress management, personal and occupational well-being, energy, lifestyle, and more. You'll also hear from loads of healthcare professionals like you who provide us with their advice on burnout prevention and share ways that you can become your most lit up self. Ready to get started? Let's do this. Welcome to the Burnout to Lit Up podcast. It's your host, your friend, your pal, Erica. And today I have the wonderful, amazing, badass Amy E. Smith on the show. She's the founder of Joy Junkie. But before I go into that, I just want to say we are an hour away from San Francisco, and it was my first time there over the weekend, and I loved it. It could be, in my book, the coolest city I've been to. San Francisco was amazing. And so right now we live around San Jose, and I just want to give a general note that the food in this area does not disappoint. I mean, the food here is, I can't find words. It's like beyond amazing. There's so much diversity. We've had Indian, we've had Chinese. I can't wait to try pho, which is Vietnamese. I learned how to pronounce it correctly. I can't wait to try that. We're just having the time of our lives eating here. So yeah, if you have any San Francisco recommendations, any tips on what to see, where to eat, all that stuff, please send that to me. Erica, ERIKA @joyenergytime.com. So I just love Amy. I love what she's about. She's originally from California and now she's in North Carolina. She's a certified confidence coach, masterful speaker, and personal empowerment expert. Bam, right? Like she's just amazing. And she is the founder of the joyjunkie.com. Junkie as in JUNKIE. She uses her role as a coach, writer, podcaster, and speaker to move individuals to a place of radical personal empowerment and self-love, which you'll get to hear all about in this interview. With acute focus on helping people find their voice, Amy is highly sought after for her uncommon style of wisdom, humor, irreverence, and she has been featured as an expert on Fox 5 San Diego and yourtango.com. She's also a whiskey drinker and novice kickboxer. So she, like, her energy, her everything she's about, like, she's just fiery, full of passion, full of this light, and she's just badass. Like, her website is so cool. I love her image. I love everything about her inside out. She's amazing. We had such a great talk. There are so many golden nuggets in this episode. I cannot even emphasize that enough. Like, you're gonna have to listen to this twice, okay? Because there is some pretty mind-blowing truths that she dropped. And her delivery is amazing. She tells you straight up what it is. So yeah, there's some cursing. Just want to give you a heads up. If you have the kids, you got to hide your kids. Because there's just no censoring when it comes to this stuff. And I really love our interview. So without further ado, here we go. So I like to ask, my first question is, tell me your story. You know, you can make it as long or as short as you want, but tell me your story and how you got to where you are today.
Okay. Well, I think there's a couple of different ways in which I could underline for you pieces of my journey that have really infused themselves into the work that I do now. But I think probably the catalyst for me specifically getting involved in teaching people how to truly find their voice and actually use it came to a head for me in 2007 when I lost my father.
Wow.
And he had passed away. And just a bit of context for you, I grew up in an extremely conservative, born again Christian family, and in working through a lot of the dogma that I grew up with, it has now been kind of shown to me that there was a lot of things about my upbringing that were extremely cultish. They weren't necessarily what a lot of people would go like, oh yeah, I'm a Christian, or that's a Christian methodology. It was very, very different than that. So I would just want to kind of preface that the way in which I grew up was almost under sort of a cult-like mentality. So that being said, when I lost my father, this was really an interesting turn of events. So prior to getting involved in personal development, I was a makeup artist for about 10 years. And so I had the skill set to be able to do my father's makeup for his viewing at his funeral service. So I, had gotten myself all worked up and, went and, performed the makeup and did all that. I spoke at the service. And that day I get home to my mom's house essentially afterwards, and she thinks that it's the most opportune time to tell me that she feels as though my father and her have failed. She said, I feel as though we have failed as parents. And I was like, what? Kind of like, wait, what? And so here I am going, I'm the kid who is working since I was 14 years old. I put myself through college. I've been out of the house. I got married when I was 20. I've been completely self-sufficient. My two younger brothers have both done jail time and had sort of a tumultuous upbringing. I was like the good kid, like the quintessential good kid. And here I am being lumped in as, a failure essentially in her eyes because I was not, quote, walking with the Lord, because all three of us no longer subscribe to the religion we grew up in. So that to her was a massive failure and a disappointment. And I understand that, I get that, there was a very specific right and wrong way in her perspective, and I was following the wrong way. And so I remember telling my mom at that point, I was like, I really don't think you should say that to a child. And she said, well, that's just how I feel. And I recognized that in that moment, there were going to be decisions and choices in my world that really were an ultimatum, that if I chose me, that meant other people were probably going to get pissed, or they weren't going to be okay with my choices. And I realized in that moment that if it came down to that, if it came down to I make my mom happy or I make me happy, I'm going to choose me. And I don't think that there's always ultimatum type things happening in our world. But I do think that sometimes they're there. And that was one of them for me, where I went, okay, in order to make her happy, I have to completely sacrifice who I am. I have to negate my own intuition. I have to forget about anything that is of value or merit to me. And I have to essentially fold myself into this ideology that she holds dear. So that began the journey of realizing that there is no making everybody happy, and that I do have to look at my own voice, my own wants, opinions, needs, and stances as being just as important as everybody else, and start standing behind that. So even though I had been involved in personal development for quite a while up until that point, that was when I really nailed down this idea of truly knowing what you stand for, knowing what your beliefs are, and standing behind them in a really kind and loving way. Because I'll tell you what, Erica, right after that became a very combative time of my life. So it was like almost like where self-help goes bad, where I got so, emblazoned about who I was and what I was going to, that I was almost looking for a fight, where I wanted to talk to my mom about the issues that we stood in opposition around. I wanted to talk politics. I wanted to talk religion, or things that I knew would be, squeamish for her and make her uncomfortable, because I was angry and I was mad. And it wasn't until many, many years of like dealing with that and getting my own coaching and going to therapy and all of those things that I realized, oh, I can actually speak up for myself and really take a strong hold in the things that matter to me, And I can do that in a graceful, loving way. I don't have to be a dick about it. I can be kind and gentle and beautiful and really control my cadence and tone of voice. So that really has become now what I do in this world, right? Like it's an internal piece of genuinely believing that you're enough, that you're valuable already, that what you want and need in this world matters. And then the external piece of how the fuck do you express that? How do you tell somebody no? How do you tell your in-laws to stop feeding your kids sugary foods because damn it, you're a naturopath and that's not going to work. How do you actually have those conversations about asking an adult child to move out of the house, or the things that we think, oh my God, I could never say that to her. I could never say that to him. It's like, no, you can. You absolutely can. You just need the skills to do so. So that's sort of the background and the impetus of the work I do now.
Wow, that's like a whole journey, and I was meditating on this today, how like everything in your journey has served a purpose and has allowed you to be where you are now, and is like a part of the fabric of everything you're trying to accomplish. So I feel like everything you went through, that was like it has served for you to like be this badass coach and everything that you are now.
It has, and I'll tell you, for a long time, for many years, I would just go, why the hell was I born into this family? Like, what is this? And then as I grew kind of in my own belief about spirit and things like that, I was like, oh, I picked this body so I could learn these things. Like, of course I had to be born into this in order to teach other people how to find their voice, right? So you're absolutely right. It was definitely there for a reason.
Yeah. Yeah. So I know that you are a certified confidence coach, a speaker, a personal empowerment expert, all these like really cool things. So how did like coming into that, like how did that look like for you?
Yeah, well, it was interesting. I was, as I mentioned, working as a makeup artist. I was a corporate trainer for a prestige makeup brand. And by all accounts, I had a very fancy big girl job, especially being in my early 20s, and, had a company car and was traveling all over, and I had an assistant, and it was all fancy, and I was dying a slow death, just miserable. And it was interesting because at the time, my husband knew that I was really frustrated and that there needed to be some sort of change. And so he was it was on his radar, right? And so he's listening to the radio, and I think it was like Ryan Seacrest or somebody who, coincidentally, I have done makeup on, which is hilarious. Somebody on the radio, and so my husband comes home and he goes, I heard this person on the radio. Oh my gosh, it's you. It's what you've been doing your whole life. And I was like, what are you talking about? He goes, it was called a life coach. You need to look into it. And I was like, oh, okay, thanks. That's sweet of you, right? And he felt so convicted about it that he actually sent off to a coaching school for more materials to come to the house. Because he was like, you need to read up on this. Like, you need to go to school for this or something, because this is you. So that really began my journey into personal development. That was in the early 2000s. And that's when I started going to conferences and just learning about self-help, personal development, and the field of coaching in general. And interestingly enough, that first school that I went to denied me because they thought that I was too young and didn't have enough life experience, which I'm actually so grateful for, because it landed me in the arms of the Coaches Training Institute, commonly called CTI, which is an amazing coaching establishment that I'm so incredibly grateful that I got rejected from the first one, because CTI was so amazing and just completely opened their arms to me. And that really was how it kind of unfolded. I realized, like, holy shit, I can't keep doing this. I was passionate about teaching. I loved that element of my career. I just didn't want to be teaching about makeup any longer. I wanted to be doing something of profound substance. I just didn't know what that looked like. So that took a while for me to figure that out. But that really, it was my husband being so emphatic about, no, you need to look into this. And for the good part of the beginning of my coaching practice, it was all about relationships in particular. It wasn't until probably about 2015 that I realized my sweet spot was really in all things communication, saying no, speaking up, boundaries, those sorts of things, which I love. Could talk about it all day.
Well, yeah, we're definitely going to get to that. I just want to ask you quick. So like what's your primary focus in your business now? Is it speaking or coaching one-on-one, or what exactly what is it?
Yeah. So I have a specialized program called Deep Down and Dirty. And it is sort of the culmination of the last decade of my work. And it is designed to really take you through this process of the internal elements of genuinely believing in your worth, right? Like the confidence, the courage, the knowing that you're fucking good enough already, right? And then the external pieces of, okay, well, what does that mean then if I have to have a tough conversation with a boss or a colleague or a subordinate or an in-law or a best friend, or what does a boundary sound like? What are the words that I use? So it's very practical in improving pretty much every area of your life. And so that's what I do. My business has totally taken a change actually within the last month. So now the only way to really dig deep with me is through the Deep Down and Dirty program, because what I've realized is I'm no longer interested in smaller, like a home study program or something that just takes 2 weeks. Or I realized what I was doing was giving a lot of people Band-Aids instead of truly transforming. So now I do one massive immersion, and it's completely transformative into truly believing you're enough and having your voice and using it and having the skills to do so. But beyond that, there are a shit ton of ways to connect with me for free. So I also do a podcast and things like that. But yeah, so to answer your question, my main, portal body of work is the Deep Down and Dirty program.
Ooh, nice. Okay, I was curious about because I know you're on your site, you have all these cool things, and we'll get to that at the end, because I want to save the good, everything's good, but I want to save how to reach with you and how to get in touch with you, all that good stuff, right at the end.
Sure.
Okay, so I want to dive into, why do you think we get so stuck in this place of people pleasing? Because I know you said something about that, and I have, from my own experience in the past, my whole life essentially, I didn't realize how much energy it took to people please, and by the time I got home, I knew certain people that my family, they'll love me no matter what, or my husband, love me no matter what. So it's sometimes when I got home, all my energy was used in people pleasing, and then I would just totally, completely be a bitch at home, and and it's the people I love don't deserve that. And I've come over the past few months realizing, even with friends, the people I felt like I had to please the most, it's out of fear. For me, it was out of fear. So can you talk about why we get so stuck in people pleasing?
Absolutely. Well, I think you nailed it, that really, when it comes down to it, if we have any kind of fear, even if it's a fabricated fear, we will be motivated or demotivated by that, right? We'll be motivated into action or inaction, one or the other. And so I think that a lot of times what's happening is we do have a genuine fear of some kind of consequence. Either that person's not going to like me, or I'm going to say something dumb, or they're going to report me to somebody, or, we're afraid of being uncomfortable. That's really what it is. So for instance, if I know you have a lot of people who are in the healthcare profession. So if you're working with a client, let's say, and you're looking at your schedule, trying to fit somebody in, and you aren't able to fit them in within that week, and they say something to you oh my God, what am I going to do? I really need to get this therapy, or I really need this help, or I really need a session, or blah, blah, blah. What am I going to do? So in that moment, what do we usually do? We usually cave. We usually go, okay, well, I'll fit you in somewhere. Let's figure it out. Because what's happening in that moment is we are so fucking uncomfortable. We're so uncomfortable that we interpret that uncomfortability as guilt. As in, I've done something wrong because this person's upset that they don't have an appointment slot. There's not an appointment slot. So I must need to do something. Instead of saying what's really real, which is probably, oh my gosh, I would love to accommodate you. Unfortunately, I can't. What do you have next Wednesday? I can get you in next Wednesday. Instead, we people please and we go, I can't bear this uncomfortable feeling. I'm so afraid of what they might think of me that I'm just going to cave. And then what happens? We bulk up our schedule with a bunch of obligations, say yes to everybody, and then we take it out on our kids, or we take it out on our spouse, or we take it out on our best friend because we're at our limit. So to answer your question, yes, I definitely think there's fear, but I also think that there's two fallacies that people buy into as a truth around speaking up. One is, if I speak up for myself, then I'm actually being a bitch, right? Like that's just a snotty, assholey thing to do, which is totally untrue. And the other is that I'm purposely inflicting pain on somebody. So by giving voice to something, like for instance, with my mom, because she will inadvertently be hurt. Like, for instance, if she invites me to church and I decline, she might be hurt by that. There may be some pain. That doesn't mean I inflicted it. That doesn't mean that I'm responsible. That doesn't mean that I've handled myself in a poor manner. All that means is that my mom has a difference of opinion about church than I have an opinion about church, right? So it doesn't mean I behaved from one of ill intention or from malice. In fact, I've had that transpire between the two of us. And I've said, I thank you so much for thinking of me. That actually makes me really uncomfortable. My humble request is that you refrain from inviting me in the future. I know it's not coming from a negative place at all, but please just know if I'm ever interested, I'll reach out to you. I truly hope you can understand. None of that's malicious. None of that's ill-intended. None of that is being an asshole. In fact, that's being extraordinarily loving, radically authentic, because I'm not lying. I'm not being a people pleaser. I'm not blowing smoke up her ass so that she thinks that I am complicit. I'm being really honest, but I'm doing it in a loving, kind way. And we can do that with anything. With, like I said, asking for a divorce, asking an adult child to move out of the house, asking in-laws to stop feeding your child certain foods, like we can do it with everything, but we make up this idea that being vocal is a dick move. It's not. So I like to say you're only being a dick if you're actually being a dick. If you slap somebody, if you're making a snide comment, then you should feel guilty because you have done something wrong. But guilt is reserved for rerouting poor behavior. So stop saying I feel guilty just because you can't come to somebody's rescue. You haven't done anything wrong. You can certainly say, I feel uncomfortable, I feel compassion for that person, I feel empathy, I feel concern. But guilt? No. You haven't done anything wrong if you can't fit somebody into your schedule or, help them move this Saturday. No guilt, just concern, compassion, empathy. So I kind of went all over the place. But yes, fear, and then this idea that if I speak up, then I'm an ass or I'm inflicting pain on someone.
Yeah. Wow. I mean, like, I have so many thoughts because I would call myself a recovery. I'm in recovery for people pleasing because, because I actually thought that if I don't do it, whether it's at work or whether it's with friends, then I'm going to be left out, or I'm going to be like anything, like just
sure.
My self-esteem literally rode on the fact that like I need to be the yes woman for everyone and everything. And I actually think, I know it had, like, looking back at certain situations, it like backfired because certain friends would, like, I think they got sick of it, of me saying yes to everything, like half-assed and not meaning it. And at work, that's what led me to burnout. That was one huge part of it, was like the setting boundaries. And I know I'm going to ask you that in a second, but I just have to say, like, in my last place of employment before we moved, I got more comfortable saying yes and saying no to things objectively. So saying no, and it felt weird, but then actually I realized that no, I'm saying no because this is the best for both parties, and I'll say yes when it's when I know I can help out. So can you talk about boundaries? And I know, like, you kind of mentioned it with, like, okay, for example, the in-laws or kicking your adult child out, or like all those examples, like setting boundaries, like what would be the first step?
Yeah, so this is great. This is a great question. So it can really be broken down into three major pieces of a boundary, all right? But before I even tackle that, essentially what a boundary is, all it is it's a fierce decision about what you will or will not tolerate going forward. That's it.
Wow.
A decision about what you will or will not tolerate going forward. Now, just because you decide that doesn't mean that anything is going to change, right? So the first piece of that is a clear decision, right? So you need to be really, really clear on what the boundary is for you. So let's say you have let's say you're the healthiest one in your workplace and you're always really making sure that you consume healthy food, and somebody in the office is always giving you shit for your dietary choices, always calling it rabbit food, or you're such a fucking hippie, or something that is just clearly making fun of you for your food choices every single day, right? So if your first step is to decide on the boundary, so the first would be, okay, I need to tell Karen or whoever that I will no longer tolerate any commentary about my dietary choices, right? It's not that it's not always that it has to be a specific behavior. Sometimes it's just content. Like, I don't want to discuss this specific thing with you ever again, right? So that's a part of the decision. And I always will tell people, or often advocate, to be as specific as possible, right? So if it's an in-law that I actually had a situation like this with a coworker years ago, where she had an in-law, her mother-in-law always said, when the kids come to stay with me, I'm going to get them baptized. And she would say, absolutely not. We don't subscribe to that religion. You will not baptize my children. So that was something that she had to be really clear about. So in her decision process, it would be, I am no longer going to entertain any conversation with my in-laws about baptism, right? Like, it has to be really hard lined, right? The decision. The second piece of that is the delivery, is to actually tell the person what you will or will no longer tolerate. And that piece is being as explicit as possible, right? Like, you need to be able to definitively say if they have breached the boundary or not, right? So for instance, if that example, if that friend of mine would have said to her in-laws, I need you to be more supportive of our beliefs, that's really ambiguous. That's really vague. We can't say yes or no, mom, mother-in-law, really follow through on that or not. But you can say, we will no longer entertain any more discussion about baptism in particular, right? Like, there's a very clear, it's quantifiable. We can tell if it's been breached or not. So then you actually deliver it. And so that piece of clarity is huge, right? Like, being really, really clear, very specific about what you are or are not asking for going forward. And then to do that with the utmost grace and kindness and how you deliver that, right? And so you're not saying it passive aggressively or with a biting tone or a lot of blame or acrimony. So again, this is why I do an entire 4 months on this, because it takes a minute to get some of this stuff really ingrained. So this is very much the Cliff's Notes. But then the final piece, which I think is perhaps the hardest, is the enforcing. Because I'll tell you what, you probably can relate to this, Erica. A lot of times when you start flexing the muscle of speaking up for yourself, or when you do decide to say no or decline something to somebody who is used to you being that yes woman, they usually don't like it, and they will test you, especially family members. So most of the time they will go, oh, she doesn't really mean it. Or Amy's, she's on this weird kick about what to feed her kids, which I don't have kids, but do you see what I'm saying? Like, they'll be like, oh, whatever. That's not really Erica. Erica will always do whatever you ask her to do, So they'll push and they'll test. So the enforcement piece is that you have to go back and reestablish that delivery over and over and over again until you reach your own personal ultimatum, right? Like where you go, listen, mom, if you bring up the baptism thing one more time, I'm not going to allow the children to come and visit you, right? Like then you might get to ultimatum point, but you get to decide individually, how many times am I going to reinforce this? How many times am I going to go back over this boundary and say, hey, sibling, hey, Karen from the office, hey, whoever, remember when I mentioned that thing to you about fill in the blank? I was really serious about it. Again, I would like to ask you if you would please refrain from fill in the blank. I truly hope you can understand. Thank you so much, right? Like reinforcing. So yeah, so that's the process of it. But I would offer to everybody out there, just start thinking about where in your life are you tolerating something that really is not in service of you. A lot of times it's our obligations. It's things that we overextend ourselves with. And a lot of times if we kind of observe our larger life, we can go, oh yeah, I was afraid to tell my boss, no, I can't stay late today, or whatever it might be for your specific situation. Because I think a lot of us have heard that quote, you teach people how to treat you. And I think it's largely through what we choose to tolerate. It's not just what we say. It's what we don't say. It's like, oh, sure, Jane will always stay late because she never says anything otherwise. Meanwhile, she goes home and bitches her husband out because she's so stressed out about work, but she doesn't tell the person who can actually do something about it. So it will affect you. It will affect you. You have to make sure that you aren't tolerating a bunch of bullshit in your life that you ultimately don't want. So I think that's the first step, is for everybody to start sizing up. Where don't I give voice to things that are really bothersome to me? Who are those people with? Because sometimes we're just really highly triggered by somebody we revere or look up to, like a boss or a mentor. And so those are the people that are hard to speak up to. Sometimes it's family members. We all have those people that make our job a little bit more challenging.
Yeah. I mean, I can think of 2 instances where I started to gain discomfort with speaking up. And actually in the job where I completely burnt out, like just went beyond like what I should have. I remember I got to a point where I was like, okay, like, this is not working out. So the first thing I'm going to do is make it known that I'm not going to tolerate these sorts of actions that are going on at work, or I'm not going to tolerate being spoken to in a certain way. And what happened was that exactly what you said, that some people, like when that happens, particularly the place where I was, they didn't like it. And in fact, it's like they would have preferred, anyone with a warm body to just follow what they said. But it's like someone is there challenging, and it actually created more and more of this like void. And then that's when I realized, okay, this was actually perfect, because then now I know I'm not meant to be here. And if I hadn't done that, if I would have just kept going and just listening and saying yes and doing what didn't feel right to me, then I would, like, who knows, like, I don't even know what would have happened to me. Like, it was the most uncomfortable situation. And some of it was with what I said and with what I didn't say. And people started to know, oh, we can't mess with her. And that's when I realized, yeah, so this environment doesn't support me. So it was like, that's how I found out. So it's just crazy how it like finding your voice gives you so much insight into like what you should do.
I think you brought up a really great point, though, about what we make certain things mean. So, for instance, when you started speaking up and you got met with more evidence of why you needed to leave, you kind of went, oh, okay, yep, I see why this is not a conducive role for me or environment for me. A lot of people don't do that. They go, oh, that person doesn't think this is a good fit or doesn't like my behavior or how I've been showing up. That must mean they're right. We give a lot of credence to other people's opinions instead of looking at the way they're showing up or the way they're behaving gives us a lot of information on if they are healthy to be in our life or not. a lot of times we find ourselves trying to please a bunch of people we don't even like who are assholes to us. So let's stop and think about, like, where do you really want to expend your time and energy? I had a really similar situation that happened when I decided to leave that makeup brand that I was telling you about. And I was leaving specifically to go into wellness, to go into coaching. And the minute I put my notice in, my supervisor was like, "Are you serious? Oh my gosh. And so is on maternity leave. How could you do this?" And really just made me wrong. Like really made me wrong. And I remembered thinking in that moment, similar to what you shared, thank you so much for proving me right. Thank you so much for confirming that this was the best decision I could have made. Now, had I not had a confidence at that point, I could have gone, "Oh my God, they're right. I'm a horrible person. I'm doing this all wrong." I could have gone into major self-doubt. So that's another piece of, how do you want to process the information that you're getting? If it's somebody you don't want to be around and they're being negative, great. Take it as a sign, like, sweet. Thank you for showing me that you're not conducive to my system. It's like, if you can't process gluten, or you break out in hives when you have dairy, it's like, you listen, you go, "Oh, okay, that dairy doesn't work for my body, or that gluten doesn't work," right? Same is true for people who are assholes to you. Like, "Oh, cool. Thank you for showing me what you're made of. You don't work with my system. Peace," and you don't have to be a dick, but you also don't have to have it destroy your confidence or your self-worth. You can just go, "Oh, okay, aptly noted. Moving on. You don't work well with me. That's fine."
Yeah. Yeah. Oh my God, that's true. Because if it's a physical cue or if it's a physical injury, we pay attention. But if we perceive it as there's something wrong with us, or I'm just going to people please, it's like we people please sometimes for decades. And what's really sad to me is when someone doesn't necessarily agree with maybe, or doesn't align with something, with either at work or with a friendship or with a family member, but out of, who knows, out of this fear, out of this need to people please, people can stay stuck for a long time, like for decades, right. and being stuck in a cycle of doing what they think they're supposed to do, and that absolutely terrifies me. So like I've this year I've really explored what areas in my life am I people pleasing in, not in every sense of it, and standing, like that example I gave was a few years ago, and that's when I got so uncomfortable that I had to speak, because I've always labeled myself shy, that I don't speak up, and because of that, people have labeled me the same way. So, like, what would you say for someone that is absolutely terrified for that confrontation? Like, how, and I know you talk about, like, saying it with elegance and not being a dick about it, but, like, how, for someone that's never confronted in their life, like, how would they go about it?
So, a couple of things. First of all, if you don't like confrontation, join the club. Nobody does. So when I get people who tell me, like, "Oh, Amy, I just hate confrontation," I'm like, "Really? I love it." Said no one ever. Like, nobody likes it. And I still don't. And I teach this for a living. So you have to come to terms with the fact that it is uncomfortable, but you're doing it for a greater good. It's really similar to being extremely sore after a workout, and it's like, oh, it hurts, or the workout sucks even, but you're doing it for a greater goal of your health. You might have to go in for a surgery, let's say, and have rehab that you go through. That's not fun, but it's for a greater, bigger goal for your health, right? This is the same. And the reason why this is imperative, the reason why this is so incredibly important, is because the way that you show up with other people is indicative of how you feel about yourself. So when you constantly put everybody in front of yourself, you constantly say yes to everybody else's happiness and agenda and not yours, what is happening on a subconscious level is you are reinforcing to your psyche, to your subconscious, that your wants, opinions, and needs just aren't as important as anybody else. So if you have that issue of I'm not good enough, I'm not smart enough, pretty enough, competent enough, accomplished enough, have a big enough practice, a good enough parent, and you people please, it's likely that you're reinforcing that message about your enoughness. You're not good enough to speak up. Who are you to tell your mother-in-law what's up? Who are you to try to start your own business? You're not enough. You're not enough. So it becomes this self-fulfilling prophecy. So for anybody out there who's going, holy shit, I didn't realize I was feeding into my worthiness or my lack of worthiness or enoughness through people-pleasing behaviors. Now you understand you're doing behaviors that say everyone else is more important than me. I'm not valuable enough. So one of the pieces is just to acknowledge I have to do this for my self-worth. I have to give voice to things for my own emotional health, and to acknowledge that it's not easy. It isn't easy for even the most skilled person, but it's worth it. It is absolutely worth it. The same way getting up off your ass and doing a workout is worth it versus the comfortable sedentary lifestyle, right? It's worth going through PT in order to have a mobile body. It's worth it. And this is the exact same skill. You know, it's learning a new skill the same way you learn a new workout routine or you go through physical therapy and you learn how to use your knee again or whatever it might be. This is the same sort of thing. So, and in order to get you there, again, this is why we dig so deep into it in my program, is we unpack a lot of the beliefs that have you stuck thinking you aren't valuable enough, thinking you aren't worthy of giving voice to things. And then we move into, okay, now how do we actually do it? Because the deal with fear is we just think, oh, I'll start my business when I'm not scared. Or I'll do this new, healthcare app when I'm not scared. Or I'll do this new collaboration no, that's not how it works. We will feel fear all the time, whether it's a tough conversation, a really great job opportunity, or just going to fucking Zumba for the first time and feeling like you're going to be an idiot. We will feel fear all the time, whether it is like a gun pointed at our heads or something amazing like a new job opportunity, right? So it's up for us to dismantle that fear and look at it and look at, am I actually in danger? Am I going to lose my life if I speak up to my boss, or if I tell my husband what I really think about what's happening between us sexually? It's our fear response, our primitive fear response. We actually think we're going to die, right? I know that sounds so incredibly hyperbolic and over the top, but primitively, that's what's happening in our minds. We go, oh my gosh, if I'm not liked, I might die. If they don't approve of me, I might die. If I'm not loved, I might die. That's what used to happen, right? Like when we needed people in order for our survival, in sort of our primitive man, ancestry. But now we don't need that, but we still have that same fear response. So a lot of that is dismantling the fear and looking at, wait a minute, am I just scared of that response? Could I live through that? Yeah, I could live through that. What's really happening? Am I being a dick? Am I being malicious towards that person? No. Mm-hmm. Okay. Am I worthy of speaking up for that? Yes. Am I allowed to be scared? Fuck yes. Of course I can be scared and behave from a place of courage. That's the distinction, right? I am scared all damn day, Erica, all the time.
Me too.
But I choose courage.
Yeah.
Choose to behave from courage because I want something better for my life.
Yeah. I could literally frame some things you said, like frame it, put on the wall. Like, it's so, because and I always get this phrase wrong, always, oh my God, you hit the nail on the head. Is that it?
Yes. You're so cute.
I always get it wrong, and my husband he laughs at me. Anyway, but yeah, because I think my whole life, my self-worth literally was attached to making people happy. And I experienced like what's it called? Like the bottom of this, like I was like, when I hit my lowest point in this was actually during our engagement party. I kept changing the date so many times so I can make sure every single one of my friends went. So there I'm people pleasing. I'm people pleasing with I actually had a little breakdown, as I notoriously have with anxiety, and I had a little breakdown. I'm like, well, there's too much food, or like people look like they're not having fun. Like, what can I do? And my best friend, she grabs me and she goes, Erica, people are here for you. You don't have to do anything. And I was like, and I didn't realize at that time that I still didn't realize like what was going on, but that was like maybe the first like pre-awakening of I need to change because it's like not healthy. It was making me physically ill.
That's right. That's right. And a lot of times, you know, I know you really hit that place in your burnout. And for a lot of people, they hit it physically before they really start addressing it emotionally, right? Like that's where we get ulcers or we get chronic anxiety or we get these things that we think are, oh, everybody's dealing with it. And you don't realize that so much of it has to do with how you engage with the world, how you view yourself as you deal with everybody else in your life. And so I oftentimes will say, constantly putting everybody in front of yourself is poison disguised as nobility. We buy in, especially as women, to this idea that giving to everybody else is so fucking noble. And look at how amazing it is that I'm always at the PTA meetings and I'm always handling everything at the office and I'm always... No, that is not noble. That is poisonous, as you can see. It creates disease in our body. It creates nervous breakdowns. It creates engagement parties where you can't fucking enjoy yourself because you're so goddamn concerned about everybody else's happiness, which you cannot control, by the way. Mm-hmm. So spoiler alert, everyone, you cannot control everybody else despite what we're told. We're told that we can make our children flawless and we can make our patients perfect and we can have the best relationships. And it's simply just not true. We can only be the best version of ourselves. So one of the things that I talk about a lot in my work is really getting nailed down on your intention versus your reception. So you are responsible for who you are being. You are responsible for your behavior, for your cadence, your tone of voice. And that's about it. You are not responsible for how you are received by your coworkers or your family or your best friends. That's actually their responsibility. You can't control their emotions. You cannot control their behavior. You can't control any of that. So I'll give you an example. Around the time of the 2016 election, I did a podcast specifically around dealing with sort of the changes with the new presidency. And it was really truly about everything that we've been talking about today, being able to speak up for what you believe in, but doing it kindly, doing it in a really loving way. So I put the podcast out. I was really proud of it. And then I had responses that were all across the board, right? Some people were like, thank God, thank you so much for doing this. I had no idea how I was going to deal with the holidays this year. Thank you. I feel like I can be around my family. Other people were like, you lost a listener. I can't believe you did this podcast. Who didn't even listen to it. They just thought it's negative because I tend to be pretty liberal. And they didn't catch it. And I said, well, I would really, really be honored if you actually gave it a chance to listen to, but if not, be well and, be well on your path and your journey. And then there were other people who just didn't give a shit, didn't follow, they were head in the sand about it. I don't even look at it. Now, if I would have tried to make all those different ways in which I was received, all those different people happy, first of all, it's just impossible because they're in 2 different camps, right? 3 different camps. And that would enable me to be radically inauthentic. I would have to be a fucking liar to somebody, right? In order to make them happy. So I realized okay, it's not about everybody being happy. It's about Amy being happy with how I showed up. So I constantly am asking myself, especially in the face of opposition or criticism, am I proud of the woman that I am? Am I proud of how I've shown up, how I've behaved? And so I did that exact same barometer. I went back and I listened to the podcast and I said, no, I'm so happy with how I showed up. And I'm just going to release everybody else with love. So I don't have anything I need to clean up or apologize for. What I'm experiencing is just straight up uncomfortable. It's uncomfortable when somebody hurls an insult at you. It's uncomfortable when somebody doesn't like your point of view or is in direct opposition to what you believe. That will always feel shitty, but it doesn't mean I did something wrong. It does not mean I have to apologize. You know what I'm saying? But that's different if I were to lean on my intention versus somebody else's, right? So that's why you have to have a compass that's internal. You have to have a guidepost that's internal because externally we can't do it. We can't make everybody happy.
Yeah, no. And I think in business, I've learned, like, for example, the more polar you are, but again, being true to yourself, like true to yourself, but not being so vanilla and just sticking to what you believe in, sticking to your values wherever in business and life and relationships, then you will attract the people that are meant for you. And that's what
That's
I had
right.
a problem with, like just growing up, just trying to please everyone, trying to be friends with everyone. So I want to ask you something before I ask you my signature question.
Okay.
I get so excited about my signature question. Like, it's so cool. To me, it's so cool.
Oh, nice.
But anyway, I just like for someone listening and they're like, yes, Amy, like this is everything I needed with like and more. Like this is like I didn't realize how serious this issue was, and I think a lot of people can resonate with this. What would be your number one secret to confidence, and what would be like maybe a practical step or two to get people moving forward?
Okay. Number one secret, which I don't know as if I am the first coach to advocate this, but I really think 100% it's your self-talk, how you speak to yourself day in and day out. And I think the most practical tip for that is to start with an inventory. And we'll talk a little bit. I have a freebie that involves a way to do that. But essentially what you're doing is you're going through your life. And I would say just take maybe like 2 or 3 days and really acutely observe your thought process. And sometimes it's easier to acknowledge your emotions first. So if you're feeling really pissed or, kind of just a little despondent or unhappy or maybe a little anxious, in those emotional discomforts, just start asking yourself, what have I been saying to myself? Did this start when I went to the gym and started comparing myself with everybody else there? Did this start in the parent pickup line where I started to think about how so-and-so's mom is a much better like Pinterest mom than I am or whatever? Was it that comment from the office? Somebody said something and you just made this whole crazy story in your head about it. So start looking at what am I saying to myself? And when does that start happening at length? Like when does it seem to be the most chatty or the most mean even? Sometimes it's everything related to your body image, right? It's every time you look into the mirror, you get radically triggered. Maybe it's something always around business and competency and acumen in what you do in your particular modality or skill set. A lot of times we'll have 1 or 2 areas where it hurts the most, where we're the meanest to ourselves. So your first step is you absolutely have to get on top of what have I been saying to myself and when? When does it kind of go off like fireworks? And then you can start crafting a more and powerful thing to say to yourself. But what I'll throw out just as a quick fix is you can just straight up tell yourself like, nope, that is not a helpful thought. Not going down that road, not going down that road, not going down that path. I'm not focusing on that. Stop, abort mission, changing paths. Do you see what I'm saying? Like you don't have to go, oh no, you're gorgeous and intelligent and beautiful. You don't have to do that. You can just simply say, shut up, we're not going down that path. And that is a great quick fix to stop those thoughts and start distracting yourself with something else that's a little bit more positive. But yeah, that is the go-to basic thing that we all have to be aware of and continue to work on is the self-talk piece.
Yeah. Yeah. And I think I don't know about the fake it till you make it. But like something like that, I don't know if you agree with that phrase, but I've heard like stories and I've been reading things that people just literally not even fake it, but they just believe it and therefore it is. Like, is that something that you would agree with?
Yeah, to me, it's not about faking anything. It's about how do I really want to behave? In fact, I just had a conversation with a client about this because I gave her the question of if I truly believed that I am enough, how would I behave in this situation? So it's like, even if you don't quite believe you're enough, let's start thinking about, okay, if I was confident, Or if I did believe I was enough, how would I approach my husband? Or how would I approach this coworker? Or how would I converse with my mom? So you can start looking at the empowered version of you. Like, how does she act? How does he deliver information? You know, how would he stand? What would she say to that person? So you start looking more so at who is the person that I want to be, and then you start acting like that in baby steps instead of saying like I need to fake who I am. It's not that. It's an active pursuit of the character traits and qualities that you really want to embody.
Yeah. Yeah. Like I heard, I took this workshop in March, and the teacher said, if you want to be a writer, dress like a writer, act like a writer, look like a writer. And it's kind of like that same thing. And we actually had these picked like a personality out of a hat, and it could have been like anything. Some of them are really funny, but you had to act. You had to like do a line acting like that. And I happened to pick cool. And I walked on like it was like a little circle. It was like a very intimate workshop, and I walked onto the stage like I was cool, and I was giving like my whatever, I forgot what the script was, but I was acting cool. And then the teacher's like, that was like the most confident I've ever seen you. And it's like, you are what you make of it.
Mm-hmm. Completely.
Yeah. Like, we don't realize that we're that powerful, but you said it perfectly.
Mm-hmm. We're self-fulfilling prophecies, right? So like, if right now you think that you're not lovable, good luck finding fucking love.
Yeah.
Because you're going to attract more and more evidence to support the fact that you're not lovable. So when you start to untangle that deep-seated belief, that's why my work goes really deep into unpacking those disempowering beliefs. Because once you actually believe you're enough, you find examples of that everywhere because it's your new baseline. It's like, well, of course that person thinks my work is impactful. I'm amazing. You know what I mean? Yeah. You start noticing stuff that is positive evidence as opposed to negative evidence. So, yeah.
Oh my God. Well, this has been incredible. Like like I said, I could frame everything you said. This was so amazing. So I want to ask you, when are you your most lit up self?
Oh, when am I my most lit up? I am, well, first of all, I'll be really honest. I'm lit up when I'm making a lot of money, definitely. But money is just energy, right?
Yeah,
so
yeah.
If there's like a shit ton of positive energy coming into my bank account, I'm lit up. But I also feel like I'm the most lit up definitely when I'm speaking, when I'm on stage. I mean, it could be in theater, because I do some community theater too. Like, that's probably it. Now that I'm thinking about it, it's when I'm acting. That just fills my soul. And then from more of like a work standpoint, I think it's when I'm being the most kind to myself about my schedule and I'm not taking on too many projects, because that's when I'm a better teacher. That's when I'm a better coach. That's when I'm a better speaker, podcaster. All of that stuff is when I haven't spread myself too thin so that I can still give back. But a lot of it has to do with really managing my overwhelm, because I can tend to be that one who's like, no, more and more, let's take on this and that and this and that. And I have to go, oh, no. So there's a handful of things.
Yeah. Well, oh yeah. Thank you. That's awesome. Thank you for sharing that. So where can people find you and connect with you?
Yeah. So I was mentioning a little earlier about a freebie. I have a workbook that everybody can grab. It's a virtual workbook. You can also get it in an audiobook format. And it is 9 different challenges that can help you specifically catapult your self-love or your self-confidence. And there's actually an inner critic inventory place in that workbook for you to journal and take notes with the things that we mentioned today. So I think that should be really helpful. But everything that I'm up to is over at thejoyjunkie.com. And junkie is Junkie. And I have a weekly podcast. I'm always talking about this stuff. And, you can grab freebies over there and hang out. I'm always on Instagram too. Same thing, The Joy Junkie.
Okay, cool. I will post the link for your freebie and your podcast, Instagram. I'll post all that good stuff in the show notes. So thank you again, Amy. This was great.
Oh, you're so incredibly welcome. It's been an honor.
Thanks so much for listening. Like what you're hearing? Subscribe to our podcast, rate, and write a review on iTunes. It would mean the world to us. We come out with new and exciting content each week that will help you slay your burnout beast. So share the show with your friends and your coworkers so we can build a better healthcare industry together. Thanks again.